The genius son of a millionaire, single dad, is allergic to every woman who wants to marry his father, except the street snack seller girl. Do you prefer chocolate or strawberry, Ericy? The woman's voice cooed like she was speaking to a toddler instead of a 10-year-old boy. Her blonde curls were stiff with hairspray, her smile polished and syrupy. It clung to her lips like it had been rehearsed 1,000 times in a mirror. Eric frowned and took a step back. My name is Eric, not Eric E. She laughed, flashing her perfect white teeth, and glanced at the glittering designer watch wrapped around her slender wrist. So proper, just like your father. Eric didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He stared directly into her eyes. You don't like kids. You're pretending. Her expression faltered for a second, just enough for Eric to catch the twitch at the corner of her mouth. What are you talking about? She said sweetly. I'm just trying to get to know you. No, Eric replied firmly. You're trying to win me over so you can marry my dad, but as soon as you do, you'll send me off to some boarding school in another country. She blinked, her smile vanishing. You're just a child. Don't think you're that smart. I am a child, Eric said calmly, but my dad listens to me. And he did. Always had. Eric Carter, at only 10 years old, with an IQ of 160, had become the unofficial guardian of his father's heart. David Carter was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, a self-made billionaire, admired and respected. But behind the boardroom charm and philanthropic headlines was a man who had quietly raised his son alone since Eric was 2, and Eric had seen them all. The women who fluttered into their lives like butterflies drawn to light, glossy, graceful, well-spoken, and full of hidden intentions. Eric had dismissed each one with quiet efficiency. Most thought they could fake kindness or affection. Most thought children were easy to fool. They were wrong. That afternoon, as a summer storm rolled in faster than forecasted, Eric found himself alone outside school. The driver was stuck in traffic. Instead of waiting inside, Eric wandered toward the corner park, where puddles formed like lakes and the trees swayed in the wind. That's when he saw it. His limited edition toy car, one he'd accidentally dropped days ago, floating near a sewer drain in the middle of the street. Without thinking, he dashed toward it. He didn't see the scooter speeding around the corner, the screech of tires, the horn, the panic in the driver's voice. But before the vehicle could reach him, a pair of arms yanked him backward with force. Eric fell hard onto the wet pavement. Water splashed up his sleeves. He looked up, stunned. Are you insane, kid? A woman's voice said, breathless and sharp. Running into the street in the middle of a storm. She crouched beside him, one hand still gripping his wrist. Her raincoat clung to her arms, and her hair was pulled back beneath a damp baseball cap. In the other hand, she held a woven basket of freshly fried fish cakes, still steaming despite the downpour. You saved me, Eric said, panting. Yeah, and I ruined half my day's earnings doing it, she muttered, setting the basket down carefully. But I'd rather lose snacks than watch you get hit. Eric stared at her. You don't want anything. She looked confused. What? You don't want money? Or a selfie with my dad? You're not going to tell everyone what you did? She let out a laugh, an actual, unpolished, genuine laugh. You think people only help when they want something? Usually. Well, not me. Some of us help because someone needs it. End of story. Eric stared at her, trying to find the cracks in her story. But there were none. Her voice was real. Her expression was annoyed but kind, and she'd saved him without knowing anything about him. What's your name? Isla, she said. I sell snacks over at the corner cart, and you? Eric Carter. She raised an eyebrow. Carter, like Carter Enterprises? Eric nodded. That's my dad. She wiped her hands on a towel. Ugh, fancy. Still doesn't change the fact you almost got flattened. An hour later, David Carter's sleek black car rolled up beside the curb. Eric climbed in, still damp, quiet in a way that made his father glance back more than once. As they pulled into the driveway, Eric finally spoke. Dad, I found her. David glanced in the rearview mirror. Found who? Eric looked at him, dead serious. The perfect wife for you. David nearly slammed on the brakes. I beg your pardon? Her name is Ayla. She sells fish cakes. She saved me and didn't ask for anything. She didn't lie. She didn't act. And Dad, he gave a small, amazed smile. I wasn't allergic to her. David chuckled, surprised by the feeling swelling in his chest. So, you approve? Eric nodded. You should try her fish cakes, but don't eat too many. She's got customers to feed. David smiled at his son's unwavering confidence. After all the failed dates, the facades, the frustration, curiosity sparked in him for the first time. Who was this girl who won Eric's trust with nothing but honesty? And why, just hearing her name, did something in his heart begin to stir? David Carter had met presidents and prime ministers. He had shaken hands with billionaires, been named one of the most influential business minds of the decade, and built a company from scratch. Yet none of that prepared him for the sheer nervousness he felt walking toward a tiny street cart that smelled like fried heaven. There she was, Ayla, the woman his son had declared the perfect wife less than 24 hours ago. She was wiping down a tray, her hands moving in practiced rhythm, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her cart was modest but spotless. A handwritten chalkboard listed her snacks: fish cakes, dumplings, and something called Golden Crunch Bites. He cleared his throat. She glanced up, her expression friendly but unsurprised. Afternoon. You want sweet or spicy? Which one's your favorite? He asked. She tilted her head, looking at him for the first time, really looking. You're not from around here. I suppose I stand out. You're wearing a suit worth more than my cart, she said with a smile. But that's okay. Everyone eats, he smiled. Then I'll have what you recommend. She handed him a paper tray. Fish cakes, fresh out of the fryer. Careful, they bite back. He took a bite and blinked. Crispy on the outside, soft, flavorful inside. This is incredible. Told you, she smirked. Just then, a small voice piped up behind David. I told you, too. Ayla looked past him. Her smile widened. Eric, you back already? Eric grinned, bouncing up beside his dad. She remembered me. I never forget someone who almost got flattened on my watch. David watched the exchange closely. Eric was glowing. His eyes sparkled, and his usual wariness around adults, especially women, was completely absent. Ayla passed Eric a tiny snack box without asking. On the house. But only if you promise not to scare me like that again. I promise, Eric said between bites. David leaned against the cart, still observing. You seem to have made quite the impression. I save lives and feed them, Ayla said, pretending to flick her collar. Superpowers, basically. David laughed. You have no idea who I am, do you? She paused, glanced at him again, and shrugged. Nope. Should I? He looked at her for a moment, then smiled. Not at all. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the city, David made a spontaneous decision, one that even surprised himself. Would you join us for dinner sometime? He asked, voice even. Ayla blinked. Dinner? I'd love for you to come by, just a casual meal. At our place? She glanced at Eric, then back at David. I appreciate the invitation, but I don't really think I'm the type to be invited into places like yours. David straightened slightly. And what kind of person would that be? Ayla gave him a soft smile. The kind who doesn't belong in a mansion. I fry fish. I don't sip wine. David opened his mouth, but Eric cut in before he could respond. She's not like the others, Dad. Ayla looked over, surprised. Eric stepped forward, his voice clear and certain. She doesn't need you. That's why I trust her. She's not trying to get anything. She just is. And I need her. Silence followed. Ayla stared at Eric, visibly moved. David felt something shift in his chest, like a door creaking open after being locked for years. Eric turned to Ayla. Please, don't say no. Not for you, for me. Ayla bit her lip, hesitating. You two are something else. We get that a lot, David said quietly. I'm not used to this kind of attention, she admitted. Especially not from guys in suits and kids who sound like philosophers. Eric laughed. That's fair, she finally sighed. Okay, just dinner, but I'm bringing dessert. David smiled. Deal. As she packed up for the night, David found himself watching her. Not with the distant curiosity he'd often reserved for people outside his world, but with something gentler, something he could not yet name. That night, as Eric fell asleep with a content smile on his face, David sat by the window, thinking about Isla's eyes, her fire, and her refusal to play the game. She didn't know who he was, and somehow that made him want her to know him even more. Eric had never been good at lying, but when it came to escaping his bodyguards to sneak off to Isla's snack cart, he had somehow become a master strategist. He had memorized their break rotations, found shortcuts through the garden hedges of his private school, and learned how to blend in with groups of kids just long enough to disappear. Every time, he ended up at the same place, a corner near the park where the smell of fish cakes and sweet batter floated like music, and Ayla stood like a lighthouse in the noisy, moving tide of the city. She never scolded him for skipping security. Instead, she taught him how to flip batter without burning it, how to adjust seasoning just by taste, and how to make dumplings with his eyes closed. Sometimes she told him stories about customers, funny, tragic, wild, tales of the real world beyond chauffeur rides and ivory towers. Eric soaked it all in. "I like it here," he said once, sitting on an overturned milk crate, munching on a shrimp roll. Ayla glanced down at him. "Why? It smells like fried oil and sweat." "Exactly," Eric grinned. "It smells like real life." David noticed the change almost immediately. Eric laughed more. He argued less. He stopped questioning whether people liked him because of Dad. When David asked him why, Eric just said, "Because someone sees me for me." That someone, David realized, was Ayla. Their paths crossed more frequently. Sometimes it was coincidence. Sometimes it was David ordering snacks under the pretense of trying something new, and sometimes it was just wanting to see her. She greeted him the same each time. No flattery, no flirting, just curiosity in her eyes and that ever-present wry smile. "So, do CEOs really eat snacks from the street?" she teased once. David chuckled. "Only the brave ones." And somehow, in between bites and conversations, something began to shift. One Friday afternoon, David left work early and drove past the park. He did not expect to see what he did. Eric, curled up on a bench beside Ayla's cart, asleep with his head resting on a small pile of napkins. Next to him sat a thick packet labeled Math Olympiad Practice Set 4, filled with Ayla's handwriting, corrections, notes, and encouragement scrawled in the margins. David stepped out of the car and approached quietly. Ayla noticed him first and raised a finger to her lips. "He had a long morning," she whispered, "and apparently skipped lunch." David looked down at his son. Eric's face was peaceful, calm, softer than David had seen it in weeks. "He insisted on finishing 3 full practice sets before eating," Ayla added. "Said he wanted to earn his shrimp balls." David gave a low laugh. Then his eyes drifted to the packet again. "You're coaching him?" he asked. Ayla shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's brilliant, but he overthinks. I just help him find the joy in it." David looked at her for a long moment. "Do you know what you're really teaching him?" She tilted her head, unsure. "You're teaching him how to be happy." Ayla's breath caught, and for once, her words didn't come easily. "He's just a kid I care about, that's all." David smiled faintly. "And sometimes, that's everything." They stood there a while, watching Eric sleep. Eventually, Ayla spoke again, her voice softer. "I didn't mean to become part of his world. I was just trying to be kind." "You didn't try," David said gently. "You just were." The moment lingered between them. Not romance, not yet, but something tender, quiet, like the first chord of a song waiting to be sung. And in that silence, beneath a fading sun and the scent of warm dumplings, something else began to grow. A connection, deep and slow, that neither of them had seen coming. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the clink of champagne glasses. Waiters in tuxedos weaved through clusters of women in designer gowns and men in tailored suits, while a string quartet played something elegant in the corner. It was the kind of place Ayla had only ever seen in movies. She stood by the edge of the room, dressed in a simple navy mood dress Eric had picked out, her fingers gripping a glass of sparkling water she could hardly sip. Beside her, David Carter, the host of the evening, was deep in conversation with a pair of foreign investors. He had introduced her simply, kindly. "This is Ayla," he said, "a friend." A few heads had turned, some with curiosity, others with judgment, and soon the whispers began. "That's her? The snack cart girl? I heard she sells fried squid. I heard she rescued the boy. Or maybe she just staged it. Some girls know how to play the long game." Ayla heard it all. She didn't flinch. She just kept standing there, smiling politely, eyes searching the crowd for one familiar face. Eric was supposed to arrive late. She hoped he wouldn't come. Not here, not now. A group of women approached her, impeccably dressed, perfectly poised. One of them, a red-lipped woman with diamonds on her ears and steel in her smile, tilted her head. "So, you're Ayla, David's friend." "Yes," Ayla said simply. "You must be very interesting. It's not every day someone goes from food carts to formal galas." Another woman laughed softly. "Oh, come on. We all know how this goes. Girl saves boy, girl meets dad, girl moves into mansion. It's the modern fairy tale." The third woman chimed in, her tone icy sweet. "We just hope it's love and not strategy." Ayla said nothing. Her fingers tightened around her glass, but her face remained calm. She would not snap. Not here, not tonight, not where it could humiliate David. Instead, she bowed her head slightly. "Thank you for your concern." Just as one of the women opened her mouth for a final, sharper barb, another voice cut through the room, a voice clear, sharp, and young. "Stop talking about her like that." Heads turned. A hush fell. Eric stood at the center of the room, his cheeks flushed, his small fists clenched. "You don't know anything about her," he shouted, voice trembling but loud. "She's the one who saved me. She's the one who didn't care who I was or what my dad owned. She didn't want anything." Guests froze. Glasses paused mid-air. Even the quartet stopped playing. Eric took a breath, his voice steadying. "If I have to choose between all of you and her, I choose her. Every single time." The silence was absolute. David moved before he even realized it, crossing the floor in a few long strides. He reached Ayla, took her hand in his, and turned to face the stunned crowd. "Eric's right," David said, his voice low but firm. "This woman is someone I'm proud to know. Someone who has brought more light into our lives than any gala, deal, or dinner party ever could." Ayla stared at him, stunned. He gave her hand the smallest, strongest squeeze. The women who had mocked her looked away. The whispers died. And for the first time that night, Ayla didn't feel like she was standing on the outside. She felt seen, chosen. As the music cautiously resumed and conversation returned in broken waves, Ayla turned to David. "You didn't have to." "I did," he said, "and I wanted to." From across the room, Eric watched them, his dad and the girl who had never once treated him like a bargaining chip. He smiled. He had shouted, he had chosen, and for the first time, the world had listened. The next morning, Ayla's photo was everywhere. Not the one of her handing out fish cakes in the rain, not the one with flour on her cheek, laughing with Eric. No, this one was different. It was her, standing beside David at the gala, hand in his, with headlines that screamed from the digital walls. "From fish cakes to fortune, street seller hooks a CEO. Snack girl's overnight climb, is it love or strategy? Cinderella or con artist?" Ayla stared at the screen in her tiny studio apartment, her untouched tea now cold beside her. Her phone vibrated relentlessly. Unknown numbers, reporters, trolls. Each message stung worse than the last. She had never asked for this, never chased fame, never pretended. All she had ever done was save a boy and feed him dumplings. By afternoon, she made her choice. She closed her cart early, turned off her phone, and sat down to write a letter. David knocked on Ayla's door 3 days later. His collar was undone, his eyes shadowed from nights of little sleep. When no one answered, he knocked again, harder. Still nothing. He looked down and saw a small brown package sitting on the step. His name was written in soft handwriting. He picked it up and opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a box of Eric's favorite shrimp dumplings, cold but neatly packed, and a folded note. "David, I'm sorry. I didn't ask for this world, and I can't survive in it. Please tell Eric he didn't do anything wrong. He deserves better than a mother who gets mocked in the papers. I care about him. I care about you. But I don't belong where everything I am gets twisted into something ugly." David sat on the step for a long time, staring at her words. He had been foolish to think he could shield her just by holding her hand in a room of critics. He thought his name could protect her, but all it did was paint a target on her back. Eric stopped asking where she was on the 4th day. He stopped eating her favorite snacks, stopped smiling. David tried everything: bribes, game, even a visit to the science museum. But nothing worked. "Did she leave because of me?" Eric finally whispered one night, curled up in bed. David shook his head. "She left because people were cruel, but not you, Eric. Never you." Eric clutched the blanket tighter. "Then why didn't you stop them?" David had no answer. He sat there in silence, watching the boy who had once been fire now slowly fading into ash. And in that stillness, he realized something with a clarity that hit deep and hard. He could build empires. He could earn billions. But if he let Ayla walk away, he would lose the one thing that money could never replace: the laughter in his home, the light in his son's eyes, the woman who had made both feel alive. Rain drizzled gently over the Saturday market, turning the cobblestone walkways slick and silvery. Tents flapped under the weight of the wind, and the usual weekend cheer had faded to a quiet murmur. Ayla stood behind her small stall near the back corner, her hands trembling as she arranged skewers of grilled tofu no one had yet come to buy. She had barely been sleeping. Her heart pulsed in a rhythm that felt both hollow and too loud at once. She missed Eric's laughter, missed David's calm voice, missed everything she told herself she could live without. But she stayed away, because how could she belong in a world where headlines twisted her heart into scandal? She reached for a paper tray when a familiar voice, ragged and out of breath, cut through the murmur of rain. "Ayla!" She turned and froze. David was soaked to the bone, hair matted, suit jacket abandoned, his dress shoes sliding slightly on the cobblestones. He looked like he had run straight through the storm without stopping. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care how he looked. He had come for her. "Ayla," he said again, stepping closer. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. "You disappeared. You left us." She tried to swallow. "I had to." "No," he said. "You chose to." Tears stung her eyes. "David, let me speak." He took another step, water dripping from his sleeves. "I don't need someone who fits into my world. I don't need someone who plays the role of perfect. I've met those women. I've walked those hallways. I've sat at dinner tables with people who say the right things and feel nothing." He reached out and took her hand, cold, shaking, wet from rain. "I need someone my son trusts. I need the woman who made him laugh again, who taught him how to cook dumplings and dream beyond his textbooks. I need the woman who ran into traffic for a stranger's kid and didn't even flinch." Ayla's breath caught. Her tears mixed with the rain. He stepped even closer, lifting her hand and gently placing it over his chest. "Can you feel that?" he asked, voice softening. "It hasn't stopped racing since you walked away." "David," she whispered, eyes searching his. "I don't care what the world says. I care about how you made that world disappear the moment you looked at me like I was just a man, not a name, not a title, just someone worth loving." A sob slipped past her lips. "I don't belong in ballrooms," she said. "I don't know how to speak their language or wear their armor. I'm not enough." He shook his head slowly. "You're more than enough. You're real. And if there's one thing this life has taught me, it's that real is rare." She looked down at their hands, his warm, hers trembling. "Eric," she said softly, "does he still—" "He asks for you every night," David said. He hasn't smiled since you left." Ayla closed her eyes. The weight of longing, love, and fear collapsed all at once. When she opened them, David was still there, waiting, not demanding, not convincing, just choosing her. She finally nodded, barely. "I don't know how to walk into your world, David," she whispered. He smiled, tears in his own eyes now. "Then don't," he said. "Just walk into mine." And in the middle of that rain-soaked market, beneath flickering tent lights and the scent of grilled corn and fish cakes, Ayla fell into the arms of the man who chose her, not because she fit the world he built, but because she made that world feel like home. The city moved on, as cities always do. Skyscrapers gleamed, cars honked, headlines changed. But on one quiet corner near the park, where the scent of fish cakes drifted through the air and laughter once again danced on the breeze, something had quietly returned. Ayla was back, not in some grand announcement, not with flashing lights or designer clothes. She returned exactly as she had left, wearing her apron, hands dusted with batter, standing behind her modest little cart with a smile that lit more than just faces. It lit hearts. She turned no cameras, she answered no questions. She simply opened the lid of her fryer, dropped in a handful of batter, and picked up right where she left off. The regulars noticed first. "Didn't think we'd see you again," the man from the flower shop said. Ayla smiled. "Couldn't stay away. I missed the smell of fried dreams." That made him chuckle. But it was not until a familiar pair of footsteps ran across the crosswalk, fast and breathless, that the world seemed to stop for a moment. "Ayla," she looked up. Eric was sprinting toward her, hair windblown, school bag bouncing behind him, tie askew. His eyes sparkled with something fierce and bright and unstoppable. She dropped the tongs and stepped out from behind the cart, but before she could say anything, he threw himself into her arms, nearly knocking her over. "Mama!" he cried, voice cracking, arms wrapping tight around her waist. "You came back!" Ayla froze. Then her arms closed around him. And she broke. Not with words, but with tears that slid down her cheeks as he held her like the world might steal her away again. "Mama," he whispered again, softer now. "I missed you every day." She stroked his hair, pressing her face to the crown of his head. "I missed you more, baby, so much more." A few feet away, David stood quietly. He had followed Eric here, just in case, but he did not interrupt. He watched them, his son and the woman who had changed everything, wrapped in the kind of love that needed no bloodline to be real. He had once dreamed of giving Eric a world without loneliness, without hurt, and here it was. Not in marble mansions or glossy magazines, but in a street corner hug. In a word whispered for the first time, "Mama." Ayla finally looked up, meeting David's gaze. He walked toward them, slow, steady, eyes shining. Eric pulled away just enough to take her hand and place it in David's. "This is my mom," he said simply. David smiled. "I know." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to, because in that moment, with Ayla's hand in his and Eric pressed against her side, David Carter realized the truth. He didn't need the world's approval. He didn't need perfect appearances or polished reputations. He just needed them. And as Ayla turned back to her cart, laughing through tears and offering Eric the first fish cake of the day, David stayed right where he belonged, beside the only family he had ever really needed. The street looked different that morning, not because it had changed, but because of what it had become. A stretch of sidewalk near the park, once known only for its snack cart and a boy who liked to sneak out for dumplings, was now laced with fairy lights strung between lampposts, paper lanterns swaying in the breeze, and a scattering of folding chairs facing a handmade wooden arch wrapped in ribbons and jasmine. There were no velvet carpets, no golden cutlery, no glass chandeliers. But it was perfect, because it was where everything had begun. David Carter stood at the end of the aisle, his tailored suit open at the collar, his hair windblown and absolutely unconcerned with perfection. His hands were clasped in front of him, and for the first time in years he looked not like a CEO, but like a man waiting for something that mattered more than any fortune he had ever made. Music drifted from a small speaker tucked beside the florist's cart. The scent of fried snacks and fresh daisies filled the air. And then, Isla stepped into view. She wore a simple white dress, light as air, with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Her smile wobbled, and her eyes shimmered, but she walked with a confidence born not of elegance, but of truth. This was her sidewalk, her story, her beginning. Eric stood between them, dressed in a tiny gray suit that didn't quite fit and a bow tie he had tied himself, crooked, proud. In his hands was a folded piece of paper. When Isla reached the end of the aisle, he cleared his throat. Everyone fell silent. Eric looked up, eyes brighter than ever. "I wasn't always good at people," he began, voice loud and clear. "I knew when they were lying. I could feel it, like an itch under my skin. My dad called it an allergy." He smiled. "It got worse whenever someone tried to fake love, especially the ones who said they wanted to be my mom." A few guests chuckled softly. "But then I met Ayla. She didn't try to win me. She didn't even try to win my dad. She just was. She saved me before she knew me. She fed me before she asked my name, and for the first time ever, my allergy was gone." Ayla's hand flew to her mouth. Eric looked at her. "You cured me, Ayla, not with medicine, not with therapy, but with your heart." He turned to the crowd again. "She's my mom, the best one I could have ever chosen." By the time he stepped back, half the guests were wiping their eyes. David stepped forward, taking Isla's hands in his. "I once thought I needed someone who fit into my world," he said softly. "But then I realized what I needed was someone who made me want to live in theirs." Ayla's voice trembled, "And I thought I had nothing to offer, but it turns out love doesn't care what you have. It just asks if you're willing to give." They exchanged vows beneath the archway built by the same man who once built boardrooms, now choosing wood and nails over marble and steel. And when they kissed, it wasn't met with applause. It was met with warmth, with peace, with belonging. Months later, the little cart had become a small shop tucked beside the park, painted yellow with a hand-painted sign, Eric's Snack Corner. Inside, children came every Saturday to learn how to fry dumplings, fold batter, and tell stories. The lessons were free. The only rule, always share your snack with someone else before eating your own. Ayla taught with flour on her cheeks and laughter in her lungs. David worked from home more often now, his office window overlooking the park. Sometimes he'd sneak in just to help roll dough. Sometimes he'd just sit at the counter and listen to Eric tell new kids how to fold fish cakes like a pro. "We use 3 pinches of love," Eric would say. "No more, no less." They did not live in a mansion. They lived in a 2-bedroom home with a creaky floor and a backyard filled with herb pots and hand-drawn chalk art. Dinner was sometimes takeout, sometimes burnt, but always together. There were no chandeliers, but there were string lights over the dinner table, and laughter in every room. One night, as the sky turned gold and the sound of cicadas hummed in the distance, Eric sat on the front steps, his head resting on Ayla's shoulder. "Hey, Mom?" "Yes, baby?" "Thanks for not giving up. On me, on us." She kissed the top of his head. "Thanks for calling me, Mom." David joined them, dropping down beside them, pulling them both close. And there, under a sky full of stories and the smell of warm batter, the Carter family stayed, not because of money or titles or expectations, but because love, when it is real, doesn't need palaces. It only needs a place to land, even if it's just a sidewalk, where fish cakes sizzle and hearts begin. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey. The genius son of a millionaire single dad is allergic to every woman who wants to marry his father, except the street snack seller girl. This story reminded us that love does not need chandeliers or luxury to be real. It only needs honesty, courage, and a heart willing to give without expecting anything in return. Ayla did not step into their lives with a plan. She simply was, and that was more than enough. For Eric, for David, and for a family that learned how to laugh, heal, and dream again. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or even brought a tear to your eye, please support our channel. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more unforgettable tales that heal, inspire, and remind us all of the beauty in the everyday, because sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin on the most ordinary sidewalks.